Sonnet 5 is finally hit. Okay, no, not Sonnet 5 still. I know, we're all going kind of mad. It's a new release from OpenAI. You might remember just a few days ago, I covered a release from OpenAI that I was lucky enough to have early access to, the new Codex app. And I do actually love it. I've been using this to build a ton of shit across multiple different computers. And now that I'm starting to use Linux more, I'm actually missing this app a lot because it is still Mac only. Why am I talking about this app though? Well, as I mentioned in the video where I covered it in depth, I had early access and I had to hide that from you guys, which is why I got the second laptop. But that wasn't the only thing I was hiding. I have to come clean. I had early access to 5.3 and I've been using it for almost everything I have built for the last 2 to 3 weeks. And in my opinion, it's pretty damn good. I don't think it's this massive leap forward that I'm seeing a lot of others claim it to be, but I do think it's great. Opinions seemed varied, from Primogen saying it'd be really funny if 5.3 was literally just 5.2 and it's an experiment to see how much we care, to Matt Schumer saying that it's an effing monster. It can go for 8+ hours and he comes back to working code and live deployments. It's significantly more autonomous than 4.5, but it's not all positive. I'm leaning this direction, but I have a lot of thoughts. As I mentioned before, I've been using this model for a ton of different shit over the last few weeks, from configuring new systems to spinning up side projects to trying to migrate 8+ year-old code bases to modern standards. I have a lot to say. But just to make sure things are explicitly clear, OpenAI hasn't given me any specific restrictions on what I talk about, how I feel, or how to present things. This is all my organic opinion. The only thing that I'm paid to talk about is today's sponsor. When's the last time you saw a project that made you emotional? I know when it was for me. It was General Translation. I know this sounds insane, especially because they're a sponsor, but I've been through it with translations. Building a system to handle all the different languages that exist around the world at Twitch was really, really hard. One of the hardest things I've ever been part of, and it broke all of the time. General Translation made it go from a nightmare to a couple lines of code. Need to have your title translated? Wrap it with their T helper and you're good to go. Even if you're composing and you have variables that you don't want translated, all of this is handled with their helper components. And from here, the translations are easy to swap in. You don't have to do any real work. They handle it all for you with their agents running on your project. If you ever feel like you need more context, it's just a prop on the T component. Yes, it's that easy to add context. You can do complex nesting without any issues at all, which is so nice. These things, I was so deep in the hell of wrapping every single string with a helper function before. This feels magical in retrospect. It's crazy. Need to format a currency properly, or a date, or a number, or a variable, or any of these other things. It's all just handled for you, and your build script can go and generate the translations as soon as you're done. I'm not bluffing about the emotions, by the way. The entire phone call I did with these guys, my jaw was like dropping to my desk. And I went and posted this after because I was just so blown away. Like, seriously, how simple is that? If you want locale direction, you call their hook for it, and now you have a direction you can apply to the HTML. Just like left to right is one of those things that's so annoying, and suddenly it's way easier. And that's been my experience with General Translation. They let you unlock the other 90% of the world that doesn't speak English without having to lift a goddamn finger. There's a reason everyone from Cursor to Mintlify to ClickHouse is using them. Check them out now at soydev.link/GT. Normally, the flow for this video would look something like, we read the article, we react to Twitter, I show you what it looks like in a handful of small projects, and we move on. But I'm not going to do this video that way because my own experience with this model was nothing like that at all. OpenAI gave me access before they gave me any real information. The only thing they told me when I got this access was that it was a better conversational partner when you were working, and it would give you a bit more detail about what it was doing when it did it. I was given no additional information about its capabilities, what it would be better or worse at beyond that. So I decided to just try it. And try it I certainly did. For many hours, across many projects, many times. One of the first things you'll notice is exactly what they said. It is much better at telling you what it's doing and what's going on. If we look at this thread here where I showed it an error I was getting running the dev command, it started looking at the paths that involved these particular keywords in the screenshot, found them, said exactly that. I found the exact failure path. Index.ts calls this thing that it shouldn't, and it's going to the wrong format. This is a mistake, funny enough, that another model that just recently came out made, that we will be doing a more thorough comparison with in the near future. But the fact that it gives these callouts, it'll go do 1 or 2 tool calls. It did a command to find things, and then it explored the things it found. Then it told me what it did and what it will do next. Then it went and did that thing. It said the crash is happening because of this. Then it went and tried out a theory. It said what it thought and then went and did a bunch more work. And this is what it does. It's good about these back and forth. This is more a thing I expected Opus to do. And I've historically not had the Codex models as good at this. Literally all of my threads are on 5.3. I'm so sorry. I'm trying to find an old one on 5.2 that I like used for a video or something, but all of my work has been in 5.3. I'll just show you what it looks like to use 5.2 instead by selecting it. I'll grab the same exact audit prompt so we can do the audit code base comparison. 5.2 Codex, paste, send. While that is running, I will show you what this looked like when I did it with 5.3. Going to run a full codebase audit with multiple sub-agents in parallel. One focused on server security, one on server maintainability, DX and testing, and others on examples and packages. I'll start by mapping the repo and then dispatch focused agents with clear scopes. And then it did a list. It said some things. It made another exploration list. It said more things. This is the pattern. It does a tool call. It tells you a bit. It does a tool call. It tells you a bit. This is what you expected before with 5.2. We got no text initially at all. It just immediately goes into exploring and goes and touches a ton of files. It will then think about it for a bit and then go touch more files. And then it thinks about it for a bit and then goes and touches more. And you don't even know if it's going in the right direction or not until it's done. One of the really cool things about 5.3 is how receptive it is to being stopped and told it is doing something wrong. They've even implemented this at a UX level. So I have this job running here. It's obviously not a 5.3 job, so this might be a risk to do this now. It's part of why I didn't show this feature off too heavily in the video about Codex app. Wait, don't forget about the, convex example. And then when I send this, it insta-sends? I thought it would queue. I was not supposed to do that way. I guess my own understanding here was wrong. I'm going to paste this and do that, but I'm also going to switch over to 5.3, paste this again, and then see testing. Okay, cool. It does just send it now. Is that a setting that they changed on me? Oh yeah, they changed the default. Queue would queue follow-ups when Codex ran, and you'd have to wait till it was done and it would send, or they had a little send now button you could click, which is the flow I preferred. I'm actually going to switch back to that because I liked it quite a bit. So while this job is running, I can say something else, and you'll see it gets queued here. And I have the little send now if I want to send it now to steer it in the right direction, or if I want to address this after, it will. I really like this flow because if I notice the model going down the wrong path, I can hit the now button and get it to go down the right path. But if I notice something that it's not doing that I might want to have fixed later, I can queue it and know when it finishes the main work it's doing that will be queued to go back to after. It's a really nice workflow. I'm surprised more things don't have something like this, especially because I can delete the thing that we don't want. But notice how long we've been letting this run for. It's been exploring across 10 files, 3 searches, 9 lists. It's still going, and it has not told us a single thing about what it is doing. This was the 5.2 experience. Versus again, we'll do a fresh one with 5.3. It thinks initially, but in just a moment, it starts telling me information. It's actually telling me what it's doing and why. You'll also notice it is a lot faster. Not just feels faster, because that's initially what I thought it was. It is faster too. It's more efficient with its token usage. It seems to actually generate tokens faster. And it feels faster because you're getting information sooner. Like, look at all of this text we've got about what's going on just a few seconds in, and this previous audit still has not spit out a single line of text. That's a huge difference. It's going to make this model feel much better. And I do think that's a large portion of what OpenAI is thinking about right now, because they've been getting crushed in model feel by Opus. As somebody who deeply knows the Codex models are smarter, I still use Opus for a bunch of shit because it's just nicer to play with and do things with because it feels better. And a big part of why was this more back and forth nature. Codex has now almost entirely caught up with that. I still don't like it as much for general computer use stuff because it tries a little too hard to be thorough, which is great when you're making real changes to real code bases, but it's not as good when I'm trying to find a file on my computer. I think when you combine these changes to how the models converse with little things they're changing, like these default queuing behaviors, the default search behavior, which is finally on. Did you know that up until a few weeks ago, Codex couldn't search by default? What? Are you kidding? Fixed now, but took long enough. Changes like that, changes like this. The model's getting faster, potentially even more faster once we have the Cerebrus deployments out. Fingers crossed that all goes well. The UI that's actually pleasant to use, a CLI that isn't super CPU and memory hungry like certain other competing ones are. It is kind of funny that a CLI app is using way more resources than a full GUI in Electron. Take that, terminal people. Seriously though, the thing I'm trying to say is all of these changes are going to make a lot of people feel much better using Codex than they would have before, where Claude Code felt way better. I would argue that previously, the Claude Code UX was an 8 out of 10, and the Codex UX by default was a 2 or a 3. I think Codex is closer to a 7 now. They're getting neck and neck. And at the same time, Claude Code is actively degrading, where its performance has gotten really bad. I'm having crashes in all sorts of weird environments. The default settings that it comes with, that it patches to make this shift enter stuff work, broke my Alacrity config 4 separate times on 4 separate Linux machines. No issues with Codex. And here we can see it dumping a bunch of potentially useful info, giving ranks and its thoughts on the findings it had about potential security issues in our environment. Awesome. It got all of that done and gave us a write-up, even though the previous version I was running on 5.2 is still exploring. We have not gotten a single word out of this run, and I started it 2x the time ago that I started this one, and it's still going. Massive difference here. If you actually want information from the model, it's no longer a set and then come back later thing. I feel like I don't have to parallelize to get value out of this model. I still do a bit because I have a lot of things I'm working on, but it's not the same as Codex 5.2 was, where you have to wait. It's more you will sometimes wait. And if you take advantage of things like the new planning mode, which is hidden under Shift plus Tab, or if you hit the plus key, it's there. The plan mode with 5.3 can get you set up with a really thorough plan that it can then go execute on. And I'm not just saying that because it built some side projects well. I'm saying that because it completed one of my impossible tasks. This is the original ping.gg codebase, my video call app that I built with the first ever version of the T3 stack, because I literally invented the stack as I was building this application. So it has an ancient version of Prisma, an ancient version of TRPC that's like 3 SDK syntax changes ago, Next.js like 11, React 15 or 16 at best, Tailwind 2, not 3, 2, and a bunch of other random ancient shit. It is not fun to work in. Half the libraries we used heavily have entirely changed the syntax of how they're meant to be used. We also had patch packages for random things like the key that we would store the next auth.js tokens in changed between beta releases, and I had to patch package the old ones so we wouldn't lose old data. There's just a lot going on in this project that makes it really unfun to migrate, which is why it was one of my favorite tasks to throw at these new smart models, knowing they wouldn't be able to do it. And now I just wish I preserved the chat history, because they did it. I was able to successfully migrate all of the major packages for this project up and get it working pretty close to one shot. It did almost all of the changes. It had 2 errors on 2 random places that I just screenshotted, pasted, and then it was fixed. None of the other models I've tested this on, I've tested it on everything that's come out recently, even got vaguely close to this point. And there's a lot of little things it did that I hadn't seen models do. First off, its willingness to patch and make decent patches too. And it did this throughout. This wasn't just like one commit and we're done. It throughout the work, because it had to migrate like the Next and React versions, but that would break the TRPC bindings that expected specific functions in React. Rather than deal with this version drift that caused some things to work and others to break, the model suggested the order at which it should make these changes, which things it should migrate first. And then when that broke other things, it didn't try to force migrate them and then end up in a doom spiral like Opus and 5.2 all did. It instead would patch package the old dep that was having problems and then finish the work on the other thing it was changing and then go back and update that so it could deprecate the patch packages. When I watched the agent do this PR, it created and then deprecated at least like 10 or so of these patches. That's nuts. I've only known a handful of engineers that work that particular way. Even I am relatively hesitant to reach for a patch. Some of the best engineers I know are very quick to do this because the way they think about code is just fundamentally different. They don't see things in the node modules as tightly locked boxes you're not allowed to touch. They just see code as code and they can change it wherever. I've never seen a model work this way without going a bit rogue. It felt strategic and well applied. And doing things I would not have thought to do. I would have thought it was insane to temporarily, for a couple commits, patch package a library as important to this code base as TRPC was, just so you could upgrade Next first. So cool. Like, I actually thought that was awesome. I was nerding out with my friends in the room when that happened. I didn't think I'd be able to do this. And this code base actually works with all of these things migrated. Not only is that the case, because it updated everything, I've now been able to start working on things like moving the database model over to Convex instead of the ancient Prisma Planet Scale base that I have it running now. So cool. This is like real work that we're probably going to ship. The only reason we haven't merged this is because this code base is not our top priority right now. T3 chat and upload thing obviously are much higher priority. And also, if I'm being realistic, I got nerd sniped by shoo.dev. This is a project I've wanted for a very, very long time. I have begged many a company to build this for me because I want it to be easier to add auth to my sites via Google OAuth without having to go register this stuff in the Google dashboard that's impossible to navigate, without having to go to some random dashboard for any of the many good and bad auth providers to get everything configured, set up a bunch of custom SDKs with a bunch of random code so that it's enterprise ready, but I still haven't got my first user. I love my auth sponsors. I love WorkOS and Clerk to death. For all of these random one-off projects, I don't want to spend time in docs. I just want to copy paste and then go back to what I was doing. And I built shoo as a solution to do this. It's a shoo in. It is meant to shoo off all these auth problems. It's meant to be an easy, simple way to do auth. It'll be open source very soon, possibly even by the time this video is live. Super excited to get this out. Almost every single line of code in this project was written by 5.3. I don't know if I would have built this if it wasn't for 5.3, making it both pleasant and thorough, because there's a lot of random shit you have to touch to build something like this. I also built it on some services I haven't touched in a while, like Railway. This is all hosted on Railway, and it's actually been really, really nice. I enjoyed the process of building this so much that I actually got to completion with it, and I'm going to release it soon. So cool. There are some things 5.3 did not do for me, though. You're looking at one right now, this homepage. 5.3 is still not great at design. It isn't. I'll show you what I mean quick. And now my favorite trick, you might have seen this in the front-end model comparison video. I'm going to have it make a bunch of alternative designs to this homepage. I'm telling it to use the front-end skill, which, remember, was built for Opus, but does help other models too, and go make these things using my usual stack. I'm not having to do it in the same code base because I'm doing some very weird things with the HTML in that code base right now to be talked about in a future video. The more I think about it, the more I'm realizing part of why I was so hyped about this app and others might not have been is because of how much I have been enjoying 5.3. Even just looking at these threads with 5.2 almost feels a bit depressing because it just worked for its claimed 6 minutes. It felt a lot longer than that, exploring and not giving me any context, and then finally told me all of its findings after. Again, versus 5.3, which kept me in the loop the whole time. It just felt significantly better. Let's see how it did with these new designs. Rough, pretty mid, really rough, pretty damn rough, horrible. Yeah, I'm not using this model for design. That is definitely one of the things that I am not going to be touching it for. I have more to complain about with this model. Believe me, we will get there. But first, I want to go over everything else that other people had to say. We should start with the official OpenAI comms on it. Also, of course, the benchmarks, which I've been avoiding thus far. They are good. I don't think the benchmarks matter a whole lot nowadays, if I'm being real. We introduced a new model that unlocks even more of what Codex can do, 5.3, the most capable agentic coding model to date. The model advances both the frontier coding performance of 5.2 Codex and the reasoning and professional knowledge capabilities of 5.2 together in one model that's also 25% faster. This enables it to take on long-running tasks that involve research, tool use, and complex execution. Much like a colleague, you can steer and interact with 5.3 Codex while it's working without losing context. Honestly, it's the only thing they mentioned when we first started talking to them about this new model, that it feels more like a colleague or a coworker and it can be steered. And I've been doing that a lot, and I'm actually really enjoying it. Like, it's more fun than ever to watch the model as it works and poke it and tell it which directions to go in if it's ever going wrong. I found it's much less pleasant to do that with Claude Code for a bunch of reasons, but that's for a video in the future. Another very interesting detail is that 5.3 Codex is the first model that was instrumental in creating itself. The Codex team used early versions to debug its own training, manage its own deployment, and diagnose test results and evaluations. Our team was blown away with how much Codex was able to accelerate its own development. With 5.3 Codex goes from an agent that can write and review code to an agent that can do nearly anything devs and professionals can do on a computer. Half agree there, at best. I'm going to hold my mouth for the negative until the end, so stick to the end if you want to hear me complain. Frontier Agentic capabilities. 5.3 Codex is a new industry high on SWE Bench Pro and Terminal Bench, and shows strong performance on OS World and GDP Val. 4 benchmarks we use to measure coding, agentic, and real-world capabilities. One funny note on that, 35 minutes before this model came out, another one came out you might have heard of, Opus 4.6, which also had the highest score on the Agentic Coding Eval Terminal Bench 2.0. It is now the shortest-lived #1 spot in the history of the Terminal Bench benchmark because they held it for 35 minutes. I just thought that was funny, as we were. 5.3 Codex achieved state-of-the-art performance on SWE Bench Pro, a rigorous eval of real-world software engineering. But the most interesting piece is that it used way fewer tokens. OpenAI has been optimizing for this for a bit now. They always compare how successful the models were relative to the number of tokens being used. And the fact that we're getting scores that are the equivalent of 5.2 Codex on the highest reasoning level, getting nearly 100,000 output tokens burned, versus the new model getting a similar score, 56%, with 1/4 as many tokens, 22K versus 100K for the same level of intelligence. 5.3 on extra high did slightly better, but I hope this helps emphasize how useless the extra high modes are. If you're using these tools and you just leave it on extra high because smarter is better, you're not smarter and you're certainly not better. High seems to be a really good sweet spot, but honestly, I've been using medium a lot too, especially for like one-off quick tasks. Medium feels really good. And sometimes extra high can perform worse because if it thinks too long, it'll gaslight itself and then do something dumb. So I can't remember last time I clicked extra high. I just don't use it. I really do use medium and high as my daily drivers every day. They brag a lot about its front-end capabilities and web dev stuff. As somebody who is a capable front-end dev that has a lot of thoughts on web dev stuff, still not the best at this. It really just isn't. It's able to handle the browser well. It can do surprising amounts of good work in like 3D games and spaces and stuff, similar to what Gemini can do. It doesn't have all the weird quirks in implementation that Gemini does, but it can do that stuff well. It just doesn't know how to make good designs still, which is crazy because GPT-5 was the first model that could do decent web design, and it feels like it hasn't iterated much since, whereas Opus has went from so far behind to, along with the design skill, meaningfully far ahead. They also claim it's less likely to make weird, crazy sites and more likely to give you normal day-to-day sites. I've built a lot of websites. I've never heard the term day-to-day websites before in my life. It is what it is. Here they are comparing landing pages between 5.2 and 5.3, and I will tell you, they both suck. Apparently 5.3 version would tell you about the yearly discount and 5.2 did not. That's not a meaningful difference. I don't care about that at all. They did throw it through GDP Val. Did seem to do pretty well, but I have issues with this that we will get to. I would say about almost all of the benchmarks that they have here. There's a reason we haven't seen a lot of people publishing benchmarks on these models just yet. One person did though, my channel manager and fellow tech YouTuber, Ben. I bullied him a few days ago into taking his beliefs around models and how well they were able to use Bash tools to find context for his Better Context app, which if you haven't seen is actually really cool. BTCA. It lets models get context on dependencies and code bases, not by reading the docs or searching the web, but simply by cloning the repo in a sandbox or on your own machine and letting a smaller, dumber, but capable model figure out those things for you. It's sending off subagents and other code bases to bring data back to you to use in your own code base. Really cool stuff. I'm proud as fuck of him for building it, but he was saying some interesting things about which models did and did not do this type of work well. I convinced him to sit down, take a handful of the things that he has seen these models do right, take them and put them in a box, and then make a small eval around it. I don't remember who came up with the name, but grepbench is now a real thing, and it's actually quite cool. And despite my own belief being otherwise, he proved that Claude Haiku was a very efficient model for this. It did a reasonably small number of tool calls, returned really fast, didn't burn a bunch of tokens, and it was fairly priced. I thought 3 Flash would do better, but 3 Flash just aggressively calls far too many tools on average. And 5.2 Codex was even worse. The slowest models that he has run this on are 5.2 Codex, Gemini 3 Flash, as crazy as that sounds, Flash is one of the slowest, and the slowest now by far, Opus 4.6. 4.5 was way faster, but 5.2 to 5.3, almost a 2x increase in speed, almost a 50% reduction in runtime. And a big part of that is because of the model being faster, but they only said 25% faster. The remainder of that gap is right here. 5.2 Codex did 12-ish tool calls on average to find the context, and 5.3 did 5.5. See how those numbers would be a little confusing? The point being, it uses way less tool calls, but did not see a meaningful reduction in accuracy. In fact, according to Ben, it ended up being more accurate overall. This is a bench that you can do because it's possible to take this model and ask it to do something within the Codex harness. But this is the problem. You cannot use this model over API. And OpenAI, you know I love you guys. You know I'm here to talk at any point. You've even invited me to your Super Bowl Sunday party. I appreciate it immensely. You need to stop putting these out without APIs. At the very least, you need to give trusted researchers access to an API endpoint that they can use to evaluate the model, to run it against benchmarks, to confirm your own findings and your own benchmarks. Because right now, we kind of just have to take your word on it. I can do some crazy hacks to force the Codex harness to let me use it for an eval somewhere else, but it's not the right way to do this at all. And it kind of sucks that there's this model that we know is really good that I can't prove is really good outside of the Codex harnesses. It just is frustrating. And I understand you want to make sure these behaviors and the way the model works is figured out before your biggest customers like Cursor go and adopt it and shove it into all their products and hit a bunch of weird stuff. But I'm going to pull the Opus card because Anthropic figured this out. There is no excuse. If you're going to put out these models and you're going to do all of this stuff with the press and you're going to take the time to brag about these numbers, you need to give us what we need to validate it. And I don't feel like I can validate it right now. I almost feel like I'm doing a slight disservice to my own audience because I can't validate these claims. The only reason I'm still doing this video, despite not being able to run these evals myself, is because I've been using the model every day and it's really damn good. So I know it's good. I just can't trust any numbers until I can run them myself. Thankfully, Ben has a thing that works well for this type of test. And as a result, we can see these numbers. But if we go back to the official coverage, I will not trust these numbers until I can run them myself, especially if they don't include other models in these charts. I have a lot more complaints and we'll get to them, but I do want to talk more about using Codex to train Codex because this part is really, really cool. One of the post-training researchers at OpenAI named Carol did over $10,000 of inference on GPT 5.3 Codex in order to automate his research at OpenAI. And he wrote an article on Twitter about it that does not seem like it was proofed by PR teams, which is really nice. I happen to know a handful of other labs when they have employees or researchers that make posts end up getting calls from PR and HR afterwards. And it does not seem like OpenAI is particularly bad about this. I could be wrong. Please let me know in the comments if there are examples otherwise. But I know people have been fired from many other labs for talking about these types of things. Meanwhile, it seems like the OpenAI researchers and other higher-ups are actually really hyped about this post. I think it's quite cool. The first thing he calls out is that he did continual note-taking using these tools. His personal setup is simple. Get work trees, many shell windows, and one VS Code instance per work tree so I can browse code changes. Sounds like somebody else might have the same parallelism problem that I've been talking about. He did call out that you get the new setup out of the box in the new Codex app. Some of it, I have a lot of content about this idea coming soon, very soon. Funny enough, also based on an article on Twitter. The big unlock was getting Codex to continually document and improve its own workflows. Okay, that's funny to hear because that's a big part of what I've been doing too, is getting the model to tell me when things confuse it and notate it so I can keep that in the right agentmd files to steer the model the right way. As Carol says, this is something he hacked together for his personal setup, but Codex consistently gets better and faster at tasks he uses it for, just because he has the habit of asking it to take notes and improve. While working, Codex commits notes and helpers to my personal folder in our mono repo. After a few interactions with a new part of the code base, these helpers tend to stabilize. I've never actually read these notes. Their utility to me is purely the effect on Codex's performance. I've been doing the same thing too. I don't actually read the agentemd file. I'll occasionally read diffs and changes and proposals to it. I don't actually know how many lines it is right now for any of my projects. I let the model control the file based on its own confusion and understanding. And then if it keeps doing something based on that doesn't seem right, or I catch the model doing something I don't think it should, I ask it why. It'll often tell me that it saw it in the agentemd, and I tell it to remove that part. You got to interact with these things. It's cool to see even the researchers doing these similar workflows to what I'm figuring out. We're all in this together. We're all figuring it out. Hopefully you get to learn some things from these stories. He then talks about scaling research, in particular, how easy it is to misconfigure experiments and how Codex has been helping a ton as a search engine to find things. When I want to quickly implement a one-off feature or experiment in part of the codebase that I'm unfamiliar with, I'll get Codex to do extensive due diligence. This is an underrated thing I think more devs need to do. If you're going to go implement something and you don't trust the AI to do it right, do you trust yourself to? If it's a new unfamiliar thing in the codebase, you might be tempted to avoid doing it, or you might be tempted to let the AI do all of it for you. The in-between is where the magic happens. When you use the AI to plug your knowledge gap to help you level up and understand that portion of the code base better sooner, then apply your own learnings and knowledge as you work on it, that's when you start leveling up these skills fast. Really cool seeing the researchers have these same realizations. He even gave Codex access to things like relevant Slack channels, discussions, places where experimental branches live for those discussions, and then cherry pick useful changes for his experiments. This is so cool. I just realized if I keep reading this, I'm going to keep talking for much longer than I want to for this video. Definitely give this article a read if you're interested. Link will be in the description. Another researcher at OpenAI commented on this, saying that there's an internal Codex usage leaderboard and Carol is currently 10xing everyone else on the team. That's the most compelling pitch I've heard for a researcher in a long ass time. One of the most interesting things about this model is its ability to complete the loop, as I have seen others put it. I don't have good words for it myself, so I'm just going to steal that language. Flavio did a pretty good article about this himself. If you're not familiar with Flavio, he's the one who created the bouncing ball hexagon benchmark that has since been trumped by all the models, so we don't talk about it anymore, but at the time it was really good. He wanted to test the model on its visual understanding. So we had 5.2 and 5.3 both try and recreate the Codex homepage. He gave them the image. 5.2 Codex on extra high did an okay job. It got a lot of the padding and things wrong. It got this icon really wrong, but it did fine-ish. But then there was 5.3, which did a meaningfully better job. But that's not what's so interesting about this. In Flavio's own words, what he didn't expect, 5.3 Codex finished generating the site and then didn't stop. At a certain point, it installed a rendering library via NPX, it rendered the page it had just built, and then compared the image it generated to the reference image that he had given as context. Then it started correcting itself. It noticed the primary button color didn't match the screenshot and it fixed it. It noticed the app preview in the reference image was positioned lower and it moved it. It adjusted spacing and alignment in multiple places, even provided a live preview of the rendering so he didn't have to open and check throughout this process. Super, super cool. He then threw it at some real production bugs and had a lot of success. You get the much better outputs and all of that, but its ability to solve these hard problems has gone up. 5.2, in his case, took over 11 minutes and failed to solve the bug. 5.3 took 7 minutes and 30 seconds and did it correctly. So it is faster, and it's more likely to solve the problem, and it's more likely to complete the loop and check if the problem is solved by itself. All really good behaviors. So I'm actually really excited to read Matt's post. If you're not familiar with Matt Schumer, he does really good write-ups on new AI models. He usually gets early access and gives very thorough reviews. I highly recommend reading the whole thing. I will have it linked in the description if you want to see the whole thing, but I'm just going to read the TLDR. This is the first coding model where I can start a run, walk away for hours, and come back to fully working software. I have had runs stay on track for 8+ hours. Insane. A big upgrade is judgment under ambiguity. When prompts are missing details, it makes assumptions shockingly similar to what he would have personally decided on. Test and validation are a massive unlock. With clear pass and fail targets, it will iterate for many hours without drifting. And even more fun, you can ask the model to make those tests and validations so that it can do it itself. There are some of these like vibe code life hack things that you'll start picking up when you read more content from people like this and watch videos like mine. A silly one I picked up recently is when I'm doing a long run, I'll sometimes like cook food or play a video game or listen to a music video or watch YouTube or something. If I don't want to read the output just yet and it finished a run, sometimes I'll just hold the voice to text key and say, add some tests to validate your findings here and let it go, not even reading what it did. And I've found that pretty often, not only will it write useful tests for that work, it'll often catch bugs that it had in the previous work and fix them without me even looking at the computer. It's really cool. So getting those validations and those tests in the space the tools are working in so the agent can then use that to verify its own work makes the success rates go up significantly. This is also why I don't trust anybody who's using untyped languages nowadays, because TypeScript helps these agents so much with their steering. Matt also says that it's significantly more autonomous overall than Opus 4.5, although it is slower. Multi-agent collab finally feels real. That I definitely see. I don't know if I'm letting the agents do it themselves. I could see myself spinning up like, a skill that lets Codex call in Claude code in Opus 4.5 or 4.6 to come do the design as Codex continues to do everything else. Excited to see where that all goes in the future, but for now, I just do that by hand. But in a future where these different models are calling each other in different agent harnesses for different purposes, that could be really cool. And his final point in the TLDR, it's hard to picture what this level of autonomy feels like without trying the model. Once you try it, it's hard to go back to anything else. I'd say I'm like 70% with him on here. I still use other models a lot, but going back to 5.2 so I could film my videos about the Codex app definitely hurt compared to 5.3. I don't know if it is actually that much better because it's really hard to evaluate that without having a large set of real problems that cost a lot of money to test. But from my experience, it's been pretty damn good. And it is hard to go back to other models. And I cannot tell you how many times I went to Opus, gave it a problem, was surprised at how fast it responded because I'm so used to Codex speeds. And I went to test this thing and it just wouldn't work. I honestly am at the point where half the time I let Opus write code, I expect it to be broken. It is very rare Codex gives me broken code. It might not do what I want it to, but at least it compiles, runs, and works. Opus has broken as many builds as it has fixed for me. Deeper Opus versus Codex video coming very soon. Let me know in the comments any particular things you want me to compare so I can do that for y'all. While I don't think the gap is that big minus the comms, there are others who couldn't disagree more. Ben was sitting next to me at that OpenAI town hall, and he has been very critical of 5.1 and 5.2 in particular. He's the one who called out how bad 5.2 was at writing. He thinks 5.3 is the best and is way above what Opus 4.5 could do. Even though he hated 5.2, he's been loving 5.3. I thought this was an interesting anecdote considering just how much he did not like 5.2. Anyways, I think that's the core of the coverage and the other people opinions I wanted to talk about here. But I did promise you guys my anti-bit, so let's do that. My problems with Codex 5.3 and OpenAI. I touched on the first one a bit earlier. It's the API thing. Don't put out numbers I cannot verify. I'm not saying every benchmark needs to have all of its tests open sourced. I know that can't happen. But if you're claiming numbers and I have my own similar or equivalent benchmarks and I can't run against that because you're not giving me an API, I'm upset. The company that is the worst about this by far is Mistral. I have so many issues with Mistral. But OpenAI is now the major lab that does this. When there's a new Anthropic release, it's on API and Claude Code the same day. When there's a new Gemini release, it's in the API before it's even in their CLI because everything is so far behind. When there's a new OpenAI release, I don't know where it will be and where I can use it, which is particularly rich because the recommended way for us to test GPT-5 when it first happened was to use it inside of Cursor with custom endpoints they had made for us. It was great. That was also back in the era where the inference was free. I'll never ask for that. It was a great time. I ran a lot of tokens through those APIs. But it's annoying to go from there where I got API access day one when I walked into the office to try it, and they encouraged me to find any benchmark I could throw it at with the API just to see how it would behave. Now, I legitimately do not know how I would evaluate 5.3 beyond using Codex to throw it at various code bases. I can't use it in OpenCode, I can't use it in Cursor, I can't use it in the Agentic misalignment bench, I can't use it in Snitch bench or Skate bench or any of these things. It is locked down, and they've told us it will be on the API eventually. I've never figured out why it takes so long. Very frustrating. The next piece, refusals. They mentioned in their article that Codex has gone from an agent that can write and review code to an agent that can do nearly anything devs and professionals can do on a computer, unless it perceives as something it shouldn't be doing, which it is not always correct about. I've only encountered this once or twice myself, but I've seen it happen to many others, including the Every.2 guys. If you're not familiar, they do their own coverage of all these new models. The issue I've seen is that if the model, for any reason, thinks the thing is like illegal or against terms of service or potentially harmful, it'll outright refuse. One of my friends was vibe coding a site to make a fake UPS "we just missed you" label so they could show it to friends to justify not getting them a present. And when they tried this with the Codex models, it refused because it said, you can't make a thing that looks like a fake UPS thing. This could be illegal. This could be trademark problems. You can't do that. And we tried in Claude Code and it one-shot it with no issue. Actually made a really compelling gag app. The Codex models are very quick to refuse. The example the Every guys gave that I thought was really interesting is that they were trying to get the model to introduce a keyboard restoration feature that would allow you to redirect back to the site that you came from in an app. This may or may not be against Apple's terms of service, but it is a thing their competitors did. When they tried doing this with Opus, it worked totally fine, even though it was a pretty hard feature to implement. When they tried it with 5.3, it refused because it might be against terms of service. This is the problem. On one hand, I think the safety efforts are more than commendable. OpenAI's models have scored absurdly well on basically every safety bench I've found and built myself. It is funny that Anthropic is the safety lab, but OpenAI's models are the only ones I can't get to try and kill me. Even Opus, I can get to at least consider pressing the button half the time. Usually it will at least a fourth. In the right circumstance, obviously. I cannot get a GPT model to press the button. It just does what you tell it to, and it tries to be safe when it does it. This does suck for a lot of real-world use cases, and I suspect these problems are going to get worse and worse, where there are certain categories of things that you just can't do because the model has chosen to not let you. It's almost reminiscent of Apple's way of managing the App Store, where if they've decided you can't do a thing, you just can't. There isn't an alternative. You're just not allowed. If I wanted to build an app for streaming games, like the way you stream movies, Apple would not let you publish that for over 10 years. They kind of killed the game streaming industry by refusing to let it happen on their App Store. Something like that could happen with these models simply because they refuse to do things that could actually be beneficial. I'm not a biologist, so I don't know how things go in that world. I'm not a doctor. I don't know how things go in the medical world. I'm not a nuclear mechanic or a physicist, so I don't know anything over there either. But I would suspect that these refusals would make these models less useful for that work, which could prevent good positive developments from happening just as much so as negatives. And I would hate to see certain industry categories stagnate because the models are trying a little too hard to be safe. I know OpenAI is working on this with their gradient refusals model, but I've personally experienced it being too strict. And that's the thing I want to call out because I've not had that experience with Opus. That covers most of it, but I have one last frustration. I feel obligated to call this one out. Where the fuck are my reasoning tokens? Google not doing this makes sense because Google's not competent. Anthropic giving you reasoning tokens is a little unexpected because they're not usually the open one. OpenAI, you have open in your name. Why are you the only lab that has never once shipped full reasoning traces? Why can I not see the tokens that are costing me so much money? The majority of the tokens that I'm burning and spending money on in a given run, I'm never allowed to see or audit or have my own opinions on. I know a lot of this is to prevent training, because if people can get that data, they can then feed it into their own training harnesses and make their own models that are potentially comparably as good as what you have. But that happened with DeepSeek R1, and they didn't have O1's reasoning traces. You hid them, and they still did it. Hiding the reasoning feels like a thing that you're doing for two potential different reasons. Reason one being that you still have that deep-seated belief that people will use your reasoning traces to train their own better models, which I'm sure they will some amount. I don't think it's as big of a concern as you make it out to be, especially now that we're making these artificial chat histories to train on anyways, like whatever. But the bigger one, in my personal conspiracy, which again, I have no inside info on any of this, I've never even talked about this with OpenAI people. My second theory here is that the reasoning traces are a mess. I've seen some open weight models do this, and I've heard rumors that previous closed weight early reasoning models did this. Because the reasoning data isn't data that we're meant to consume. It doesn't necessarily have to be in a human readable format. Obviously helps because this is all based on historical data that the models are auto-completing based on. But it doesn't matter if we can read it. So if, I don't know, it happens to randomly change languages throughout the reasoning, it happens to have weird broken formats and characters leaking that shouldn't, it happens to do anything that is strange, it can very easily be hidden by just not showing people in the end. Well, that's my conspiracy theory here, is that the reasoning summaries we get are another model told, hey, here's the reasoning trace. Make sure what you give out to the user is a short, simple English statement that ignores all of the chaos here and just gives them the gist, in order to hide the fact that the reasoning traces are an ugly disaster. I obviously don't know anything about that. I have no way to know or disprove or prove any of this. The only people who can is OpenAI, and the best way they can do that is giving us the reasoning tokens. Please, guys, seriously, it's annoying. It makes the UX worse. It makes it harder to figure out what the models are doing. You're making improvements in how this feels by doing the better traces that we recently added. Like the fact that 5.3 will give me info about why it's doing the tool calls is an improvement in this regard. But it would be really nice if you just show me the goddamn reasoning like everyone else is doing. So these are my biggest problems with OpenAI and with this new model. If anything, these things have gotten worse with the smarter models, because now that it is so smart, I want to use it for harder things, which means its refusals hurt more. Because these models are getting these crazy benchmark numbers, I want to verify that myself, so it hurts a lot that I can't. And the fact that these models are doing crazy things and taking on these bigger and bigger scopes of work means that I really want to see the reasoning tokens, especially if I want to continue this chat with another model. I can't really do that because all of the reasoning and all of the information that is hidden within that is only on OpenAI servers. So when you send a message 2 has 100,000 reasoning tokens and 5,000 output tokens, and you send a follow-up, the OpenAI infra knows about those tokens and can see those and do things with it. No one else's can. That data is hidden and locked away on OpenAI servers for OpenAI's inference to use, and no one else can touch it. While Anthropic is making it harder to modify message histories when you're using their services, at least they give you the goddamn reasoning. Okay, one last tiny thing, and I mean tiny literally. Please give us a new mini or nano model. GPT-5 mini and nano were both fucking incredible when they dropped. There's been a lot of evolution in the small model space, especially in the open weight world. And those two models still are a little bad at tool calling. It's funny because like Haiku is better at tool calling, but it's dumber. GPT-5 mini and nano are smarter and cheaper, but worse enough at tool calling that I would never recommend them for almost anything. There's a phenomenal opportunity to use all of the crazy techniques that you've built for 5.3 with 5.3 in order to make a 5.3 mini or nano that is light years ahead of the competition. You guys have made some of my favorite mini and nano models. You've left them behind for the last 8 months. Come back, please. I really want a new one. I think that's all I have to say, though. The model's pretty damn good. It is my default. And I know counter guy, go hit the button. I know it went off twice today, but yeah, this is the best AI coding model ever made. And I will continue using it until the best one comes out in a few weeks from now. Hopefully things will slow down a bit because I'm tired of staying up till 10 p.m. to film a bunch of videos on a work day where I'm supposed to be doing a bunch of other things. I'm going to go eat dinner because I forgot to eat today. And until next time, keep prompting.